Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for rejoining us for our afternoon hour. I'm joined here today by our Palomar colleagues, Hossna, Sadat, Ahadi, and Luis Guerrero. And today they're here to present their presentation, Decolonizing the Syllabus. I hope you have a great presentation, and I'll see you at the off stage.
Welcome, everybody. We are so glad to have everybody here present in this presentation that we're going to have. We are very excited to share this this project that Hossna and myself have been pioneering here at Palomar, and now we're bringing to the bigger community that the NCHEA is bringing to us. I want to mention that this project was not in isolation, and the work that we were doing started prior to the pandemic and everything of the social unrest and police brutality that some people have recently awoken to. We at Palomar have been trying to grow awareness and be able to fight and combat this sooner. So this Decolonizing the Syllabus movement is actually global, and we'll mention some of those ramifications throughout our workshop together. But it really solidified when we were having our critical race theory book club discussion that Dr. Hossna Sadat Ahadi was pioneering at Palomar. And during the discussions current during the CRT book club, it arose kind of like the need and or the an active part that instructors can take and be part of would be the syllabus, and how can that look in terms of decolonizing it.
Thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Luis, for introducing our workshop today. And just to let everybody know, the workshop will really explain the importance and the impact of creating an equity-focused course syllabus. You will learn how to incorporate and promote anti-racism, equity, diversity, and inclusion in your course syllabus.
We also want to acknowledge this presentation is being recorded and will be available to you through the NCHEA or NCHEA partners. And we will also share with you a PDF summary of many of the resources, and so that you can expand upon what we have been covering here and make it your own and adapt it into your teaching.
We would like to make a land acknowledgement and recognize that we in North County, San Diego, are blessed to be on the land of Loseño and Kumaya people. It's important to understand and acknowledge the land of indigenous communities. Now I will share a link with you so you can see the native land you live and work in. So we'll take a moment to include that so you all can navigate this cool website.
So one of the things that this is something that Hossna introduced into me. So you can either zoom into any kind of like geographical part or type in your zip code. So I'm going to type in mine. Now, most of the part here in North County is Loseño Kumay, but we wanted to make this land acknowledgement so to recognize that we are not the original people inhabiting these lands, and therefore we're recognizing and want to be blessed by these people about the land that they've inhabited first.
And so it's really important to acknowledge the land that we are in, because in order to decolonize, we need to really eradicate colonialism. And so moving to that, we have a poll that we would like for you to participate in. And Luis will put the link to the poll on the chat.
So we welcome everybody just to use your smartphone, though. That's going to be the best way to not interrupt, such that you're not going between two different screens. So just type into the browser in your cell phone, menti.com in any web browser, and go to the code that is incorrectly typed. I apologize. Do not type in the first code. It is 6164703, which also shows up in the screen. And we're basically asking everybody to answer either both or just one question at a time. What do you think is equity practice in the classrooms, and what do you think decolonized education means? And as people type the information in their cell phones, we're going to see the bubbles show up in this slide. And I've just been told that I've been typing it in a different. I apologize.
I fixed it already.
So we're getting some responses. We'll be reading them as they come along, but just join us and just go to menti.com, type in code 6164703, and just share your response. This is a free response. So as we're waiting for people to respond, I'm going to start reading a couple, and then Hossna can read maybe some others. So we have somebody sharing that they want all students to feel welcomed and embraced. They want student representation, and that the syllabus is the language is demystified.
Not assuming students know what is expected, not running my class as a sink or swim. And equity practice is ensuring disability accommodations are made. Someone said, not sure.
Excellent response.
That's why you're here.
Yes. Someone would share that they want to ensure that all learning materials are free or low cost. That is actually very good equity minded. They want to eliminate oppressive policies. You're in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the acknowledgement of acknowledging diversity among students in their various forms, race, gender, ethnicity, and accommodating educational practice to be inclusive of them. There's equity practice meant to provide equal opportunity for all types of students to be supported for disadvantaged students, inform students that there are support services available if they need them.
Providing access materials regardless of students' economic status, creating safe spaces for all regardless of gender, identity, and providing the same advantages to all students. And lastly, having empathy and incorporating the ethic of love. Yes. Yes.
We also have decolonizing education is to challenge our previously held thoughts about expectation placed on students, to question how we support, challenge, and teach them.
Providing support and guidance to marginalized students, setting expectations realistically with their needs, opportunities for equipment or technology, and time in mind.
Inclusion, honesty, and realism in course content. No high
stakes test. Decolonizing education means incorporating and valuing the acknowledging experiences students come to class with. So I think we got a little bit of an overview of some of the existing knowledge that you have about what decolonizing and equity really means. And it's important that we have an idea of what that is. especially when we're teaching. And so we really wanted to just get a gauge of where you're at. And if you don't know, that's okay too. That's why we have professional development workshops and webinars for people to continue to engage in and learn how to become a more of an equity-minded, anti-racist, abolitionist teacher. Next slide, please. Yeah, perfect. So most of you have probably seen this image. How does decolonization relate to equity and anti-racism? What we all see in this image is 3 people watching the baseball game. And that's really equality, the picture on the left. Then raising of bricks to ensure everyone is watching the same game at the same time. And that's really at the same height. So that's equity, like when you're elevating some people to be able to watch the game itself. But decolonization and our vision, both Luis and I, our vision of equity only occurs when we break down the fence and all 3 people are actually playing the game and not watching it on the sidelines. Interestingly enough, those who are actually watching the game in this specific image also are racially minoritized. If you look closely, you'll notice that the people who are watching the game are actually identified as either a Black, Indigenous, person of color. So you'll notice that white hegemony and supremacy is being illustrated even in the definition of what equity means. So sometimes, you know, when we look at colonial teaching, it might not be in our conscious mind, but we really have to look at things critically. What images are we including in our classrooms, in our teaching, and in our course syllabus? First, as an instructor, place yourself in the role as a first-generation BIPOC student who is living with a disability or even in poverty. Intersectionality does exist within BIPOC communities. So looking at the Center for Urban Education, also known as CUE, at USC, University of Southern California, they developed a report regarding the syllabus being used as a tool for addressing racial equity by 3 objectives. Number 1, syllabus is used as a tool that can define equity in your course. What this means is understanding how the syllabus can act as a tool of equity. A syllabus is a tool to introduce the ethos of your class. It's an official agreement, partnership between the learner and the instructor. An equity language and statements that welcome students coming from all walks of life, especially students of color who have been marginalized and microaggressed. Number 2, students' phenomenology in your course. Consider the experiences of students of color promoting sense of belonging for students of color, being intentional with including equity, background related to race, gender, sexuality, religion, disability, socioeconomic status, and learning comprehension. We all didn't start at the same place in the level of education. So how can we expect students to be at the same space when they come to our classroom? Deconstructing the representation of white students as the norm and elevating BIPOC students in the classroom. Number 3, student-centered syllabus equals student success and achievement. Reimagining the syllabus to serve students. Students are the focal point of who we are serving on our campus. This is not about teacher-centered focus. This is merely about student-centered focus. Next slide. So it's important to know the historical perspective of how colonial teaching happened. Now, most of you might be familiar with colonial theory, or you might be familiar with critical race theory. It's important to understand how these theories are important to look at when you're teaching, because a lot of what you teach is at the practical level, but it's always connected to these theoretical frameworks that have either marginalized or have provided a platform for students' voice to be heard. And so when we talk about critical race theory, that's exactly what it has done. It has allowed the most marginalized, the most oppressed communities in our country and in our society to be able to have a voice, to be able to share their purpose of why they're here. Now, looking at the historical perspective, the foundation and history of teaching curriculum and pedagogy were framed with a colonized approach and logic. What this means is that in academia, this has become based on white hegemony, power, hierarchy, disregarding perspectives and lived experiences of BIPOC students, and then sometimes faculty and leaders. Intersectional identities such as race, economic standing, gender, sexuality, disability, immigration status, English language learner, and first-generation scholarship increase the need for teaching to become decolonized, equity-focused, student-focused, anti-racist, and the need for us as instructors and teachers and professors to have abolitionist teaching in our classroom. Thus, systemic and structural racism will need to be dismantled to see BIPOC students thrive academically and prevent marginalization from continuing in the classroom. To gain a holistic perspective, we look at scholarly research that provides diverse methods to construct and decolonize and to turn our syllabus to become more equity-minded. Next slide. So basically what happened was in order for us to really understand what decolonizing our teaching and decolonizing our course syllabus, we had to really look at our own syllabus and really doing some true, authentic, reflective work. Now, this is not easy. I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I had to look back my first course syllabus built in 2009 when I first began teaching. And I have to be honest, as an instructor, when I first started teaching, I was really wanting to get a course syllabus that, right away. So I asked my peers in my department, hey, can you help me, formulate a course syllabus, or can I see yours? And so I really used a lot of the language that I saw majority people write in their course syllabus. And I was like, okay, I'm going to include my assignments and I'm going to include my welcome message, and boom, I'm done. What I didn't realize, and it took years to realize this, was that a lot of what I wrote is very punitive and something that I wouldn't have appreciated it if I was a student in my own classroom. So it took a lot of self-reflection to look at my course syllabus and realize how colonial my course syllabus was, and therefore how colonial my teaching was. And so with a lot of conversation with my peers and other faculty within my department, I was able to really reflect on what kind of instructor I want to be and what kind of message I want out there for students who enroll in my class. Just keep in mind, this is the first document students look at when they enroll in your class. So it's important that we create these welcoming spaces. We provide sense of belonging, engagement, and validation in the first week. If we don't, they're going to drop out of our courses. And therefore, they're not going to feel like they can see themselves in your class. And so really looking at my own syllabus, I really had to think about what are some things that I would want to see if I was a student. But also, this is a great conversation to have with students to discuss, what would you like to see in a course syllabus? What did you feel most connected to? And what would you like to be more clear in my course syllabus so that I can go back and revise? Just like we do faculty evaluations, we should constantly have an evaluation process within our between us and our students to see what works and what doesn't work. So Luis has actually clicked on my course syllabus, and since then I've actually decolonized more. But for the sake of today's presentation, I'll just show you some areas that I actually really focused on my own course syllabus to become more engaging and more welcoming. So the first thing is that, it's as a person of color, as a woman of color, I always have this complex of, do I put my credentials as a doctor on my syllabus, or should I not? And so a lot of that I go back and forth with, because one, I don't want to come off like I am a doctor, but I also want to acknowledge from my students of color, my students who are first generation, my students who are immigrants, such as myself, to realize that if I can do it as a woman of color, as an immigrant, as a first generation student, then they can too. So putting in my credential was really to amplify and elevate my students to realize that, I was also a community college student, and here I am. I'm teaching this course. You can too. And it's really about promoting and supporting your community to achieve the highest degree of potential that they can, or if they choose to. So that was important. The other thing is accessibility to connect with you through email, through phone call. Now that we're in the COVID world, we have to have multiple modalities of how students can reach to us and how we can reach out to them. And don't just rely on just Canvas. Have different methods of being intrusive as an instructor, as a counselor, to be able to connect with your students. And so really for me was ensuring that I can be reached at various ways, through email, through phone calls, and I check my voicemails or go Google phone number, whatever works out. And then also, if you scroll down, you'll also notice my welcome message. So I do have a welcome message for my students. And since then, I've changed my introduction. I actually talk about the intersectionality of my own identity, my own positionality. And I really talk about how I was a first-generation college student and I was a community college student. I transferred and what that meant for me, because it allows me to be more human. At the end of the day, students want to know that you have shared some intersectional identity such as them. And so really being able to connect with them on that humanistic level is imperative. And then as you scroll down, you'll notice that there's my course description, learning outcomes, all the stuff that is usually on a course syllabus. But what's important is that also as an instructor, I had to think about it. I grew up in poverty twice in my life, once as an infant and once as an adult. And, I know that it's hard to pay for books or to get resources for school. And so I really, I took the stand of being a zero textbook instructor. And in some cases, I might be a low-cost instructor. So I might not always be zero textbook, but I will be a low-cost textbook instructor. And that means I will probably have a book for that's worth 13 to 20 bucks, no more than that. And that really, my students appreciate that, because if they're not eligible for different programs on our campus, they actually can afford the book and hence be in my class. So that's really important. To also look at decolonization is also important of, questioning capitalism. So think about that. I know that's tough, but take a moment to really think about how colonialism and capitalism are pretty much aligned. Okay, so go ahead and scroll down, Luis. And you could scroll down more until we have the section where it talks about I think you have to go down more, sorry. Okay, you could stop there. So, I do have affirmation stickers in my class too. I want students to know that I'm here to celebrate them. I'm here to celebrate their success. So if they identify as LGBTQIA+, if they, are Black students or students who are identified as having a disability, or they are Latinx, I want to be able to, give that sense of belonging for my students in this document. I will ensure that I have an introduction video on my Canvas to complement my syllabus, but I also want to put it in writing. So a lot of what I give in terms of handouts or assignments, I will ensure that students can see themselves in those handouts and can see themselves in those PowerPoints or in those images. So if you can scroll down. And then right there, I think it's right there. So I mentioned here that if students don't show up for class or don't log into Canvas, what will happen? Now, most people will drop a student after so many sessions of not entering the class. I take a different approach. I don't wait for an institutional early alert to tell my students, hey, guess what? You're failing this class. Be careful. You need that support. Let's give you those resources. I am that intrusive instructor and that counselor who will contact the student and say, hey, I noticed you didn't log in your first week of school. What's happened? Let's talk about it. Can you log in? Do you have access to Wi-Fi? Do you have a computer? And do you know how to go about and logging in and actually doing the assignments and walking them through? That's true equity. See, we can't expect to know that all students have the same resources or know how to access those resources. So equity needs to happen. And instead of talking about it, let's actually do the work, right? And so the other thing is that we have to look at different emergency funds. If they don't have a laptop or Wi-Fi connection, then we need to support them with that. Our campus has been great. We've had a lot of funds go through our foundation office. There's a lot of food and housing insecurities that our students have. So we have food drives on the weekends. But also I give them information about 211 San Diego so that they can access locally the local churches or synagogues or mosques that offer free food or support services for our students. But also even non-religious affiliated, there's different organizations in North County that provide those services too. How do students go about and navigating those resources is crucial. So having in your core syllabus, then that means, you know what? That's one less thing I have to worry about, one less barrier. I now no longer have to worry about what I'm going to eat tonight. I can do my assignment. I can finish my discussion post on Canvas. And then looking at academic accommodations, it should always be there. We have a great program with Poet, and I learned so much in the Poet training where I learned about how the importance of providing different types of closed captioning and stuff like, that you're not aware of. Familiarize yourself with it because there's so much that we need to also consider for our students who have a disability and being ADA compliant. And then, you know what? There's a pandemic of not only COVID-19, there's a pandemic of racism going on, and there's a pandemic of mental health. So our students need to talk to someone. And if it's not a counselor, maybe we can look at behavioral health services on campus. And you should be that instructor to facilitate that conversation. Don't just expect your students to do the work. There could be other things that are preventing them from doing the work. It could simply be, I'm having anxiety being at home. I'm worried about the future of this country. I'm worried about what's happening in our communities. I'm being racially minoritized by my neighbors. Or, I'm scared I can't leave my home because of my skin color. These are things we should be talking to our students about, how we can better support them rather than just referring them to the counseling office. But just know that if your campus does have behavioral health, they're there to support students too. But you should be accountable as an instructor to also reach out to your students. Go ahead and scroll down, Louise. Does it go any further? Or? Yeah. To like, oh man, I can't believe that I talked about student conduct in such a punitive way as an instructor. And so for me, I take a different approach. I fully want to embrace decolonized teaching and focus on my syllabus to be decolonized. And one of the things I had to do was really look at, student conduct. If a student plagiarizes in my class, rather than going straight to student affairs and say, okay, I'm going to go report you, you violated policy, blah, 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 blah. Why not talk to the student? Have a conversation with the student and say, tell me what led you to copy and paste this assignment. What happened? They could just simply be like, you know what? I didn't realize I didn't use quotation marks, or I don't know how to reference, or, I didn't think that was not okay. I never knew that. I never in my family ever went to school. So how do I know if it's okay or not okay? We can't expect students to know what you know. They are different. We are all very different. Our learning ability is very different and our experiences are very different. So it's important that rather than making things more punitive and setting this as, you know what? Nope, I'm not going to tolerate it. I don't like this. We need to really look at how we can facilitate that conversation. As an instructor, we need to go back to that humanistic level of just communicating with our students, and then finding out what's happening. And you could put a hyperlink on there about student conduct for the college, but I did mention on there, before we even visit student conduct, I would like to have a conversation with you. I would like to facilitate a conversation with you to get a better understanding of what led you to this. And the same thing we should do with, academic integrity. So It's important that we connect our students to so many different resources on our campus. A lot of our students don't even know about the different student support services on our campuses. So it's important that we address that. Okay, so I think that pretty much covers my course syllabus. And now I want to move it over to Luis, who will go over the do's and don'ts on a course syllabus.
Thank you, Dr. Sadat Ahadi. I want to mention that there was a very interesting question asked in the chat, like how can part-timers implement it? Kind of like departments like give you a blank template to follow. And I think that part of it is education, and part of it is having buy-in from the admin, VPI, deans, department chairs. Some of them may have not heard of Decolonize teaching curriculum and decolonizing the syllabus. Therefore, it's kind of like catching up to the times. And it is incumbent upon us to first educate ourselves and then advocate to implement these types of recommendations to the entire college. And you can first start with your class, but I do understand the different power dynamics that happens between a part-time versus a full-time faculty that have a little bit more freedom in their choice of words or choice of book, and part-timers sometimes have to follow department policies. But finding allies in the department can be the initial part, because sometimes what department chairs and what kind of like the admin really wants is adherence to kind of like, to be blunt, they just don't want to get sued. So as long as you put something in the syllabus as such that the institution is protected, then they're kind of like fine with it. So we are proposing not just, hey, we need to do something to decolonize education for our students' purposes, but also change kind of like our institution along the way. And in doing so, part of it is just language. Now, I'm a math teacher. I deal a lot with kind of like symbols and many other things. And therefore, it takes even time for me to understand how can language change. But all of those of you who are in English communication can testify to kind of like the power of language, that you can have the meaning, kind of like you can adhere to policies that are school-wide, yet you can change the tone and it can be more inviting. So this is research from Harris and Bridges that talks about the effects of syllabus tone, students' perspective on instructors, and of course, in other words, if you want to be a welcoming versus unwelcoming, or it can be punitive. So here you have two different columns. They're conveying the same essential information, let's say office hours or lecture or anything. Like even in your office hours, if you need to contact me outside of office, you may email me, call my office contact department, leave a message, which is very standard. But that doesn't make the student engage and say that I want to talk to you. You're just telling me, if you want to, here's my information, you take the initiative, but then the student doesn't feel welcome, invited, engaged to actually partake. If you just change the language slightly, I welcome you to contact me outside of class and student hours. You may email me or contact me department and leave a message. So just that and that extra words. More punitive is, I expect you to attend every class. If you cannot attend a class, please let me know. If circumstances make it more than 3 classes during the semester, I will drop you from the class roster in accordance to the college attendance policy. So this unwelcoming mode of presenting the information is a little bit punitive, kind of like saying, if you don't have your stuff in your life ready, don't bother, you're not ready, you shouldn't be in college, come next semester, I'm too busy, I don't care about your life circumstances. And again, some people think that COVID is made up or it's not even an excuse. And those things can not, students don't want to be in a class where that type of language is present. So you can change your language and still be adherent to drop this. Now, this language was developed prior to COVID. I know that the Chancellor's office has given us a lot of leeway with regard to kind of like excuse withdrawals and many other things. Even the student can drop the day of the final exam and still kind of like get an EW. So even the state has recognized that we have to be flexible, not just in the pandemic. So everything that we're proposing here is kind of like pre-pandemic. They should have been there before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and then most definitely post the pandemic, such that our students that are impacted do not have an imposed, like the rigor of kind of like, unless you're kind of like white and male and have a job, then you can study and have no constraints about time, family, and other responsibilities. No, we want it to be flexible and inviting. So you can rephrase it in the aspect of, you should attend every class, but extended circumstances arise can make it difficult. If you cannot attend the class, let me know. If circumstances make you miss more than 3 classroom semesters, you might be overextended. I ask that you come see me to discuss your options. So here, instead of saying kind of like, it's an automatic drop, don't even bother me, we just kind of like, hey, there's options. Maybe there could be, maybe your first 4 weeks were intense, but then maybe the rest of the semester, you have a more free time, and therefore you can actually dedicate and bounce back, instead of saying, oh, you missed 3 classes, bye, see you, I don't want you in my class. 1 less paper, essay, test to grade, that's best for me. So be student focused instead of teacher focused. And here are some other languages we want to make sure that you incorporate. So we want to move away from deficit thinking. A colonial view is that, oh, BIPOC students are lazy, they don't want to work for it, they don't have the means, and therefore they should go to work instead of being in school. That's deficit thinking. You're proponing and propagating punitive language. Instead of what we want to propose in a decolonized curriculum, a decolonized syllabus, is you need to be validating, you need to be welcoming, you need to be engaging, and you need to provide students a sense of belonging. Most of the times, many of us who are here are only here because we had a role model to follow. So if you saw yourself in an instructor and follow, then you can say, you know what, I know that this is challenging, yet I want to aspire to be that person because I see myself in that instructor that you had a course that inspired you. But if it's always punitive, everybody had to, most likely the experience of taking a class of a teacher that was very smart, content-wise, he was proficient with the content, yet you hated maybe most of the days that you were there because the attitude, the I don't know who you are, you're just a number, you're not a student, you're not a person. Everybody wants to be validated, be welcoming, and be engaged with, and have a sense of belonging in the classroom. And therefore it's incumbent upon us as instructors to provide that to our students, much more to our BIPOC and minoritized students that are suffering proportionally greater than other colleagues. So I want to share that I also have decolonized my syllabus, and I want to share different aspects, because one of the parts that we do want to share with everybody in this workshop is there's not one way to decolonize. It's not like saying, do it my way or the highway. Rather, it's more of an ethos that you need to assimilate and filter through your experience, such that you make it your own. One of the things that students immediately smell is fake. If they smell that you're not convinced, that you're just doing it because somebody told you, rather that there is something genuine, something that you actually believe in, then they're not going to do what you're proposing. So one of the things you have to do is very, very genuine. Do the change because you believe in it. It's not because somebody is charging you or imposing it upon you, because that, again, is the decolonial mindset. Rather, let's break the chains and everybody have the freedom of what the actual university and exchange of ideas is trying to be at. So the first thing that I want to share is, this is kind of like one of my old, like when I started teaching syllabus, very routine. So before equity and before decolonization, before abolition, this type of thinking, I was geared toward being concise. I tried to have a single page, double-sided, that's it, that's my syllabus. And I left many things unsaid. And many students didn't ask the things that were unsaid, and therefore they either didn't follow through or didn't come to office hours, never emailed me, and therefore they were lost in translation. If they did not have a person in their family that had went through higher education, they were flapping their wings and not going anywhere. So the first types of syllabus that I constructed were concise, short, 1 page, bare bone information. Yeah, short and sweet for me, not having to write much stuff, but it was not inviting. It was dry. it was bleak, it was monochrome. And when it was geared to kind of like a professional mindset in the aspect of, oh, Ian, you're in college, and therefore I'm going to treat you not just as an adult, but as a already formed professional, which is too much of a burden of some of our students, especially because we're teaching them, quote unquote, not necessarily in remedial classes, but in many of the introductory into the subject matter classes. And therefore, how can they be professionals if they're taking English 101, Communications 101, Bio 101, and therefore they're nowhere near the professional level that we are imposing that upon them. My original syllabi were faculty-centered instead of student-centered, and it was a personal journey. One of the things that we want to convey is that it's not easy. It doesn't have to go overnight. If I look at my syllabus now, I'm going to change it starting for the next semester, not just because of COVID, but because of I'm also educating myself and learning more. So it has to be personal. Do as much or as little as you feel comfortable with. Do not fake it. Rather, really commit to the framework and give access to all of your students such that they can feel it like that. So one of the things that I did is totally change it up. Not only did I put flashy colors or images for purposes of making it look good, but let's be real. Our students are constantly like social media, they like YouTube, and anything that catches their attention, they're gonna at least dedicate 2 or 3 more seconds on that than on the dry, monochrome, kind of like big blocks of text and nothing in between that they don't feel they want to read. So make sure that you are thinking the background with the other aspects that also Dr. Sadat mentioned about OER, and we're going to talk a little bit about accessibility and universal design, anything like that. So there's many things that we can do. So let me share my live version of the syllabus, such that I decided to make it into a Google Doc. Now, I know that some people do feel that Google Doc might not be the most accessible type of format, and there are ways to making Google Docs be accessible through screen readers and other aspects. So I can make a little bit of animation. I can make this a little bit bigger, and I think that's as big as I can make it in here. But hopefully, I'll mention kind of like the relevant part. One of the things that I had to educate myself was, you know what? I need to recognize my intersectionality. And I want to be proud to say to my students, hey, I speak Spanish. If there's something of the subject matter that you don't understand, hey, I can explain it in Spanish, because that's the experience that I lived through. I went all through high school in a different country. Then when I came to community college here, I had to learn math, hear it in English, translate it in my Spanish way of doing math, because that's the only way that I do math for more than 20 years. And then suddenly, find the answer in Spanish, translate the answer back to English, and then spit out the answer back either to the teacher or the test or whatever assignment I was giving. And then it took me a year and a half maybe to stop thinking in that kind of like, oh, I need to translate math into Spanish, and then from Spanish to the math, and then go back to English, and start thinking about purely in English. If my students need that, then I'm proud to help them if that is the need that they arrive. I also had to learn, I had to educate myself about pronouns. Non-binary, it's recognized by the DMV. So why would we not also recognize our non-gender specific community that we are surrounded with? And therefore, I had to learn myself about that. And now I'm a proud supporter and also safe space. We have the basic information. It took me a little while, and this is again back to the personal journey of introducing myself. I wanted to kind of like just say, oh, if I am your instructor, my qualifications should speak for themselves. But I actually had to kind of like take a knee and say, you know what? I have to be humble enough of introducing myself in a personal manner to the students so that they don't see simply like a robot in front of them talking about the subject matter, and make them feel engaging and personal. And I shared my experience of I also was a community college student, and therefore, hopefully that can make the students see themselves in me, maybe not by heritage-wise, but at least by, hey, I'm at the same place that person was 10 or 20 years ago. Maybe if I struggle through the content, I can reach the goals that I've set for myself. Basic course descriptions, basic information, kind of like, again, the affirmation, positive affirmations, either in pictures or in quotes to make them feel more inviting. Class policies, I'll go through kind of like the key parts. One of the things that I do want them to feel, especially in a math class or any of the STEM classes, is that mistakes should be expected and they are respected. Sometimes people think that I made a mistake or I'm not good enough and therefore I'm gonna leave the subject matter. That's why in the pipeline we're losing so many people to STEM, because the first assignment that they don't get an A, oh, it's not for me. That is not the case. I had to repeat multiple classes in undergraduate and even graduate class, math classes had to repeat, and that did not stop me to be where I am right now before you. And therefore mistakes should be expected and respected. Let them know, I specify this paragraph that I like, is that I am your biggest supporter. I'm invested in your success. So help me to help you and be aware of certain time commitments and things. In other words, I'm saying our class is going to be difficult. Yes. But if you let me know what you need, I can help you and I can be the guide on the side and at the stage all of the time. Again, I quote Snoop Dogg. I kind of like mention information that is relevant to them. I'm going to skim by many of the things that most people kind of like include. For example, one of the things that is we're proposing is maybe you want to change into either proficiency grading instead of point-based grading. And there's a lot of research about how even the concept of an average is actually diminishing the knowledge and information that a student can convey. So one of the things that I did transformationally in one of my classes, which is math for liberal arts, is, you know what, if a student has text anxiety and cannot pass the typical math test, maybe they can communicate knowledge through an essay or a research paper. So I make them in a math class write about math through their communication skills. And therefore, that allows them to show that maybe I didn't find the right formula or follow the right procedure in the math symbols, but I can explain the concept to you of why, for example, there's more than one infinity, and in mathematics, there's an infinite amount of infinities, each infinitely greater than the previous infinity. I know that that makes no sense, but doing the formula is kind of like too abstract or too dry. But when you can talk about the experience of people, how different civilizations throughout the earth was thinking about the concept of infinity, ancient China, Africa, Mesoamerica, and then how kind of like the mathematics took those concepts and embedded it into kind of like a formulaic way that helps us do calculus and more advanced things, is what elevates the student to say, I can communicate the knowledge base in an alternate format that is not the traditional way, yet the objectives of the class, the COR, is being met. I have more information here, but again, it's the basic. I think Hossna's also presented the best way. And this is something that you can make it your own. So one of the things that I like to tell them is the distinctions between kind of like the reactive versus proactive, the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset, because that's something that I never learned for myself as a student taking classes here in the U.S. So the Dr. Dweck's paper about the growth mindset changed things, but it took me until being an instructor at a community college level to even be aware of that even happening. So if instructors in my college education and graduate school were giving me those metacognitive, affective domain and study skills that I was lacking because of maybe I didn't have supplemental instructor, maybe I didn't have a personalized tutor that some other colleagues in my education did have access to. And so make sure that you go and visualize yourself in it and provide the students those skills. I'm not a psychologist, yet I had to learn psychology theory and research in order to elevate our students and not be the colonized view of you should know, you don't belong here if you don't know this by now. Rather it says, oh, I can help you now where you are. So regardless of where the students are, elevating from where they are such that equity is achieved instead of, oh, I gave everybody the same thing, just read the book and you should find the answers there. No, you should be the source of elevating our students, because we need to give them agency. They don't self-advocate. So how if an instructor do not propose and enhance their skills, then they're going to be stuck in a loop and just dwindle in depression and kind of like, I can't do it, versus saying, I also went through it. I found the certain resources. I make peer networks, study groups. I had mentors. So that is the key of unlocking it. And again, there's one reference, and we will make our syllabi available to you in the resource that we're going to provide you at the end of the day. So I don't want to dwell too much kind of like in details, and just share kind of like the information of making it welcoming, making it be in themselves, see themselves successful in your class is one way to promote the information. And let me go back to the presentation. All right, and we're going to continue.
And one of the things I wanted to highlight, Louise, that I love that you actually practice is that in your signature line at work, you actually write, "Si hablo español." And that means a lot for students who prefer to speak in Spanish than in English and mathematics, you know. So the fact that you have outreach to the students to say, look, I am a bilingual speaker, that provides that sense of belonging and that connection. I too have written my name in Arabic so that any of my students who speak Dari, Farsi, or Arabic know that I identify in the same community as them. And so that is really critical because they need to know who you are. They want to know. And when you were talking about trust, to build trust, it has to come from your heart. And if it doesn't, then your students will know that you're just putting something because you have to put something. We've looked at quite a few syllabuses, and we'll go over it a little bit later. But we've seen people who actually have embodied a lot of the recommendations that we recommended for them to decolonize their syllabus. And then we've seen people just plot certain languages like equity, diversity, inclusion in their syllabus, but not actually practicing it in their syllabus. So in other words, they have it in contextual language, but they're not actually putting it into practice when it comes to their actual assignments, or the language that they're using is very still punitive. This is very important because it's not just the core syllabus, it's your entire class. It's your entire pedagogy of delivering your discipline that has to be decolonized. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next slide, which is equity highlights. So I'm going to go over several equity highlights that you can see if you are actually doing this or not. And then afterwards, we will have you do an engaging exercise to see what you're actually doing as of right now. Number one, your introduction needs to be personalized. Do students know who you are? Consider introducing yourself, your race, your ethnicity, your gender pronoun, academic experience, cultural identity. As the instructor of the course and providing anti-racist equity messaging to welcome your students. And by doing so, it allows them to really understand who you are. And so when they do that, they feel that they can trust you, and they can feel that they can come to you for any times that they are facing any type of barriers while they're in school or while they're in your class. Number two, availability. Are there multiple methods students can contact you? And is there flexibility on communication times? So I'm not saying open up your weekend, because a lot of us do feel the Zoom fatigue, especially during this remote learning and teaching experience, but allow yourself to be flexible to meeting with them at different time zones during the week. Because they might be an essential worker. They might be homeschooling their kids. You're doing that too. So just know that we're all in this situation that we didn't choose to be in this situation. And so how do we get our students to be retained in our classes is to really allow that flexibility of communication. Number three, equitizing teaching. What books, articles, and reading have you been intentionally selecting in your course? Are your course resources inclusive to race, socioeconomic standing, gender, sexuality, disability, immigration status, English language learner, first-generation students? Are those being highlighted in your course books? Even mathematics, Luis went over, and he's going to go over in the next few slides, that even mathematics can have a multicultural perspective. So of course, if that could happen, if any STEM major can happen, then all disciplines should be able to have that multicultural perspective. And so the other thing I wanted to just highlight on that is being intentional of what authors you're selecting. There has been so many different research studies out there where majority of people select non-BIPOC authors. And that's allowing that perpetuation of colonialism. We're not even elevating our own BIPOC scholarly work. So that's a problem. We need to continue to focus on that and maybe raise awareness for our students to say, look, if you know any resources, let us know. Meet with your department chairs and your divisions and have department meetings and discuss how you can embed a multicultural perspective in your teaching discipline. Number 4, student input. Do students have input in shaping content or co-create community rules outlined in the course syllabus? Why not? Why don't they have that input? If the syllabus is designed for students, why not get an understanding of how they feel about it? Or what would they like to have included in their syllabus? You know, have that conversation. It's always important to understand what can you do to meet their learning. And so keep that in mind. Number 5, explicit language. Is there explicit language about the intolerance of microaggressions, racist remarks, action, and behavior in the course? In my course syllabus, I've actually hyperlinked Sue and colleagues' research in 2007 about racial microaggressions so that my students know what microaggressions are. And then I go over that during the, when we cover the course syllabus, I talk about racial microaggressions and I give them examples of racial microaggressions that was said to me. And then they take a step back and they're like, wow, I can't believe you went through that as a student. I said, yes. And you know what burdens me so much is to know that when I was a community college student 20 years ago, that racial microaggressions are still happening in our education system. And that's why we have to become activists and educators to dismantle colonialization and to elevate anti-racism and equity. So let's go with number 5. I already went over number 5. Number 6, early alert. Most colleges are investing time for early alert systems. I would say don't wait for your college to invest in an early alert. Why don't you be that intrusive instructor where you contact the student as a faculty member and you tell them, look, I've noticed you haven't done the discussion post in week 1. What's going on? How can I support you? Is there anything that I can give you in terms of resources, or maybe we can talk on Zoom, or maybe we could talk on Teams, or however method that you connect with your students or calling them. Number 7, supportive teaching. Are mistakes expected, respected, and used to elevate students' understanding of your subject? Do you offer opportunities for retaking missed or late work? What opportunities are there for students to catch up if they are behind due to technological barriers or other personal deterrents? I teach formerly incarcerated students at Palomar College. So one of the first things I had to really look at and really self-reflect is, what are the challenges formerly incarcerated students will face? Well, most of them have not used technology in probably 10, and in some cases 20 years. And so allowing me to take the time to teach them how to use technology, or meeting up with other members within the program, the transitions program, that can support them on how to use their computers or how to log into Canvas is crucial. The other thing is that looking at, what are the other barriers they're facing? Is it housing and food insecurities? What is it? I need to be able to support them as best as possible so that I can ensure that they're learning and I'm supporting their growth. Number 8, language about policy. Is language around policy and expectations of students supportive and not punitive or deficit thinking? I noticed on the chat that most of you were saying, well, this is the language our college says. Well, guess what? Our college has systemic racism. Are we just going to be complicit to it and sit back and say, okay, that's our college policy. We're going to sit around and allow another 100 years to go by and let people still be racially minoritized, continue to be discriminated against because there's systems in place? Those systemic barriers were created by colonial thinking. you know, and when I say colonial thinking, that still continues. That whole white supremacy mentality still continues in our education system, whether you like it or not. It's there. Whether it's unconscious or unconscious, implicit or explicit, it's still there. So I would say, get at the table. Get at the table that BIPOC communities built. Get at the table, let your voice be heard, and say, you know what? We might need to take a different approach. If we're looking at data and we continue to look at our DI students and continue to say they're not meeting achievement, guess what? We got to change the system. That's how they can meet the achievement, because we created those structural and systemic barriers. And it's important that we do not be complicit to that. We change it. And so that's super crucial. Number 9, resource and textbooks. Does your course syllabus provide information regarding, resources and textbooks? Does your course syllabus provide information regarding housing and food insecurities, along with other on and off campus resources that benefits economically disadvantaged students? Considering your textbook costs and financial instability students are confronted with. Remember, we're in a pandemic. So a lot of students have an increase in unemployment. The unemployment rate has been the worst in the history of the United States. And so we need to be mindful that our students are not generating income, yet we're making them buy stuff, you know? And I'll give another example. Recently, I've seen a lot of the inequities that happen. I'm a counselor, so I meet with students one-to-one, and I also teach with them. I also teach them. So, you know, I come across students that tell me, guess what? My instructor doesn't use electronic Canvas. I have to mail my assignments to their home on a weekly basis. And I have autoimmune compromise. I'm a high at risk, so I can't go to the Postal Service office every week. That's inequity. That's injustice. That is not reasonable. That is not okay. Okay? So what I did as a counselor, I emailed the department chair and I said, hey, look, I just want to point out some inequities. How do we go about in supporting the faculty member? And how can we go about in supporting our students? And how can we dismantle the inequities? Did I get the answer I want? No, but that's okay. I put it in their mind that this is not okay. And so I also assured that, look, these are opportunities for us to teach other faculty, other staff, other leaders of our institution of how we can provide different resources. Why can't we have a scanning system? Why can't we lend scanners to students? Why can't students download an app of a scanner on their phone so they can scan their assignments and then email it in? We got to find alternative ways for our students so that they are not continuously confronted with ongoing barriers, especially when their health is at risk and their financial means. So that's very important. And by me being a bystander, by not addressing the inequities, I'm complicit to colonialism. I am not advocating for decolonized teaching. I'm not advocating for that. So that's a problem, right? So don't be a bystander. Do something about it. That's where you come in, and that's where educators have to stand against racism, against discrimination. You know, at the end of the day, that is who you are. Don't forget who your core value is as an instructor. Number 10, Canvas course. Is your course on Canvas accessible, clear, inclusive, welcoming, and supportive for all learners to follow despite the modality of asynchronous or synchronous teaching? You know, don't just say, okay, I have asynchronous teaching. I'm going to put up with everything on Canvas. They're going to have to figure it out. If they can't handle it, they should drop. That's not why you went into teaching. You went into teaching because you wanted to ensure that others can see their purpose in life and that you support others and their success, and that you are passionate to deliver your curriculum and to change lives by educating them. So what we need to do is we need to educate the miseducated. Most of us have been miseducated as in educators. I was miseducated. And now I'm constantly finding myself re-educating myself. You know, how do we go about and re-educating each other? That's super important. But then we can understand how we can better support students online. And if asynchronous doesn't work for your students, then maybe you should look at synchronous style teaching. Don't go with what's comfortable for you. At the end of the day, the reason why we teach is for students. Remember that. Number 11, positive messaging and affirmations. You know, those are very critical, especially in a pandemic. As a mother, I have sticky notes all over my house so my little girls can see the positive messaging of affirmations. And then sometimes I have to see those positive messaging and affirmations. So I need to be reminded that it's okay. You got this. You are an empowered student. You are beautiful. You know, these are languages and words that some of our students have never heard before, especially our students who have been continuously oppressed and marginalized in our society, who've been told you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not beautiful. You don't belong. Go back to your country. These are messages that was told to me growing up. How do I flip the script? Affirmations. As an educator, I have affirmations, so better believe it, as an educator, I will continue to have it for my students. Even when I'm grading their work on Canvas, when I'm saying, okay, you did really well, I just want to tell you, you are progressing so well in my class, and I'm so proud of you. Keep up the great work. That little comment on Canvas, when I put it in there, my students write back to me and go, thank you, that made my day. Or they'll say, God bless you. I'm like, wow, they're actually blessing me. That's awesome. You know, think about it, how much of an impact that means for them, that little messaging. Number 12, gender pronouns. So as a college, you know, we had to look at gender pronouns, and in the beginning of our slides, you know, we included gender pronouns even in Spanish, because we are a Hispanic serving institution and we are proud of serving Latinx students as well as all diverse students in our communities. So gender pronoun is crucial, especially when it comes to students who do not refer as binary genders. Stop using rhetoric like him and hers or male and female. There are some students who are not binary. They're non-binary. So you need to know how to address them, their, and they. And if you don't know about gender pronouns, educate yourself. One of the things that I'm proud that our college has done this year, and I was part of the team who created the gender pronoun guide for our college. I can't talk about decolonized teaching if my own college doesn't have a gender pronoun. So we had to meet up as a group and talk about how we're going to put a gender pronoun out there. Now, this is a tough conversation because most people don't believe in gender pronouns. We got to challenge that. We got to tell them the importance of gender pronouns, not for you. It's not just for you as an educator. It's for our students. It's for your children. It's for your great-grandchildren. It's for the community that has continuously been hated against. How can we be more inclusive to our LGBTQIA community? LGBTQIA plus community. We need to be more inclusive. Think outside the box. Let go of your mentality of this is my way of thinking, and think for our students. Because when you think for your students, you're thinking for student success. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleague who's going to explain.
Alrighty.
Poll.
I think we've been talking too much already, so that we want you to, again, be engaged and kind of like follow. So we're going to push you back into the Mentimeter system. Let me bring up the number again. Let me just activate. Okay, so if you type in the number 61, let me type it in, 616470 the same place. So if you go back to your cell phones, it should push you to a new slide. So we now have new questions for you, meaning which resources have you implemented in your classes? And I apologize, there's something, there we go. It should now let you vote. I apologize, I pressed a button. Meaning, prior to checking our guidelines or our suggestions of how to decolonize your syllabus, which practices have you already implemented thus far? And be honest, this is anonymous. And therefore, let's see the types of resources that people have used. So literally just do the check marks. And once people finish selecting the check marks in the Mentimeter app, the bubbles should start appearing in the different locations. So again, there's one person who voted, and we're noticing that about half of the resources were used. Let's see what the other people have managed to implement thus far. And what I like is the bubbles will just start moving to their places.
And Luis, just to let you know, I can't see it's like very small, the screen, but that's just because of my view. So
yes, so in their cell phone, it should be very visible. So I apologize for the zooming of my computer.
You might.
So let me read.
You might have.
Yeah, let me read the options. One is Decolonize the Syllabus. The other is equity teaching, gender pronouns, non-punitive language, OER resources, positive affirmations, multicultural diverse readings, student-generated class rules, non-point-based grading, mistakes are part of growth, accessibility and universal designs, BIPOC role models in your teaching. There's 39 people in the session, so hopefully we can have a good representation of the resources. And again, I'm not advocating, I'm not paid for Menti, but you have to make them be engaged. So the beauty about these types of systems is that if you are in a synchronous types of class, everybody can be on their device. You can pop up many different types of questions and it'd be a dynamic, and it's very quantitative. So from a mathematical aspects, we can talk about many other aspects. And so you can use it for qualitative or quantitative data gathering.
And it's great because programs like Mentimeter and Perusal fosters engagement in your classroom teaching as well, and mixes it up a little.
So again, your students, some of them have been engaged with technology, with kind of like social media and other aspects. Some do not. So I'm not expecting everybody to have master or even have a smartphone. I still have students that have flip phones. So this is also accessible in a web page. So if you don't have a smartphone, you can access the survey through a web page, and that the students can participate this way. So we have about 12 respondents. In order to keep because we do want to move to another activity that where you actually create something. So right now we're just participating. I'm going to move to the next question. So if you haven't put in your submission, I apologize. I don't want to read. So I'm going to leave this for maybe 30 more seconds. But we're going to move to one more question, and then we're going to move to an activity where everybody's going to actually type in information for us. So let's see the next one. Now, a new question should appear in your smartphone or in the website that you're visiting. So now you need to move a slider. Number one means it's the instructor's responsibility to do what we're proposing. And then number 5 would be the institution. Or you can slide it to be any number between 1 and 5, saying that, oh, it's a quarter responsibility here, 3/4 responsibility over there. So I know that the information is super tiny in the shared document, but even your cell phone or in the separate web page, the information should be bigger to read. But who's responsible for maintaining positive teaching and learning environment? Who's responsible to create a decolonize equity and anti-racist teaching? Who is responsible to create and decolonize equity and anti-racist policies? Who's responsible for providing social and cultural capital to racial minoritized students? Who's responsible in providing PD, professional development workshops related to equity and anti-racism? Who's responsible for calling out colonial-minded and deficit-minded teachers? So just slide the scale to whichever one you want and press submit. And one of the things that, again, if you try this with your students, the more participation, you're going to see kind of like the clusters and kind of like the wave shift as more submissions are being placed. So we have one submission, another one. Nice. I find it interesting, kind of like the tug of war of kind of like which one's winning.
And then Louise, maybe we can go over the responses for both to see where there's more saturation.
Yes. So you can still make your submissions. So for right now, we're for this types of questions, we're seeing saturation more 2.1 toward the instructor is responsible. So we have 5 respondents that made a 1, then 2, a 2, then 1, a 3, and so on and so forth. Only one person made the institution be responsible. But maintaining a positive teaching and learning environment seems to be clustered toward the instructor. Likewise, creating and decolonizing equity and racist teaching. But yet when it went to policies, it seems kind of like almost halfway that both the instructors and institutions are part of it. So I want to piggyback upon Dr. Hossna Sadat mentioning the who is an institution? It's not really the building, it's the people who make up the institution. And therefore, when we say that, oh, there's a policy, we as instructors can change the policies at our own institution. So nothing is set in stone. So make sure that you have a cluster of people willing to make change, and that can start a revolution that is more student-centered and decolonized aspects. Here we have apparently halfway here. This one, professional development, most definitely is institution that we need leaders to promote it. And likewise here, deficit thinking and colonial, it's kind of like more shifted toward the institution, but it's almost kind of like halfway. I'm going to actually, just so that we can finish our slides, I will do mention that in here, it seems kind of like the most people do have an equity teaching, 10 respondents here. 7s and 8s kind of like toward the middle, but I do notice kind of like very few people have implemented student-generated class rules, only 2. Very few people have decolonized syllabus, and therefore I totally agree that there's some aspects here toward the middle where people kind of like have common agreement, but then, well, you can just expand as little or as much as you want upon which you feel comfortable, and hopefully the resources that we're providing is helping you in that aspect. But just looking at time, I do want to push kind of like the final aspects of our presentation, such that then you can make everybody of you work hard. One of the things that we want to promote is kind of like challenging mindset. And we've already talked a little bit about that. So make sure that you change the approach to your syllabus. Do not make assumptions upon students. Make sure that you make it more as a partnership than a contract or protection for you as a teacher. Make sure that you are assessing the data and change your pedagogy and teaching delivery as we move forward. Here are some affirmation stickers that we've agreed that are very welcoming that students can have and promote a more equitized and anti-racist and decolonized teaching. One of the things that we also want to promote is that we had a colleague at our institution give us a resource, and I'll share this in the chat, which actually is a depository of a positive image of BIPOC people. Many times in our classes, we have the typical images that are like in the news about people of color. And one of the things that we want to change this is that people of color can have very positive familial settings, professional working settings, that if students don't see, then we're always assuming that they are quote unquote up to no good versus they're just trying to live their lives. They're normal people like us that we need to present them in positive light. So that link there gives you illustrations that you can plug into your presentations and or class, and it's free. That resource is free.
So, so I want to just point out that when you're looking at your course syllabus, you really have to think about how this is more of a partnership agreement rather than a contract or a protection for your protection as an instructor. So it's important to look at how you build partnership between you and your students. And that's really what the course syllabus is really about. The other thing is that I had mentioned earlier, we were looking at data in our institutions, with everything with guided pathways and so many different state-led initiatives, looking at different teaching pedagogy and delivery. It's important that we critically assess our data and we look at what works and what doesn't work. And so before you run data again on your course, change your praxis. See if that makes any difference in terms of your student success or completion or retention, or even within the units of your course. If there's a class that or a section in your lesson where students are not passing, maybe the way you've constructed it is not being understood by the student. And so a lot of the different recommendations and frameworks that we have created, both Luis and I, since spring of 2020, like I said, Luis and I went through a deep reflective practice of looking at our own course syllabus and really decolonizing our own work. And then saying, you know what, this is such great stuff that we're doing between us. Why don't we share this with our campus? And so we connected with Kelly Falcone, Dr. Kelly Falcone, who's our professional development coordinator, said, look, we want to do professional development workshops because this is something that has been beneficial for ourselves and our students. We want to share great practice with our campus. And so we're so honored to be able to share this great practice with NCHEA today, because this is more than just teaching my students. These are students that are coming from my classroom to Maricosta and then transferring in Cal State San Marcos. And our students are going through so many different institutions and different levels of education that it's really going to be, it's important that we talk about it. So last session, if you go back to the last slide, Luis. Last session, we had Dr. Lisette Lassiter, who basically really took in all of the work that we recommended, and she decolonized her own course syllabus. And what's nice is that, she also teaches English for Puente students at Palomar. So this year, all has been fully decolonized. We will share a link so that you can have a look at her decolonized syllabus. But we wanted to highlight a lot of the great work that we do with professional development is not just, delivering what we want our institutions to focus on, but actually seeing the action in place. So when we see professors like Dr. Lassiter really connecting with her students by really taking a different approach and her teaching, but also in our course syllabus, it allows us to realize the impact that we can make as an institution, but also as a system to really decolonize education.
All right, and we have more resources, but looking at the time, we do want to have one final activity before everybody breaks. So we will make a PDF file available to you, and I'll share that link before the end of today. But before everybody breaks, we want to make sure that people have kind of like tangible things that you can take. So let me just copy the link here that everybody. So this is just a Google document that we want everybody to go to, and similar to the previous session on the the blind spots. We want people to participate. So please go to this Google document, and I'll bring it up such that we can see what we were expecting. So here we're presenting two kind of like subject matters, two areas of that both Hossna and myself dedicate. I can't make it bigger in my screen, but hopefully you can see it in your screen. So here we're asking to share, can you share on the left kind of like what discipline you're in and possible ideas that you have come up, you want to implement or experiment with. So for example, I'll share mine and then Hossna can share her. Maybe include in a math readings and assignments that are explaining the non-European roots of mathematics and contributions of modern BIPOC mathematicians like Mariam Mirzakhani, which won the Fields Medal in mathematics, the highest, like the Nobel Prize in mathematics, and the first female to receive it, and also of Middle Eastern descent. And therefore, I think that is a great thing to highlight that our students need to see.
And for my example, since my discipline is counseling, what decolonize equity anti-racist practice that I included that I want to implement in my teaching is including a section on my course syllabus about no microaggressions and exercise about racial healing and practices, especially with what's going on. And I think continuously, even if we're not in the situation where we're at, racism has been apparent throughout our history of our country. So to be able to have racial healing circles was something that I took away.
So please go into the link of the Google Doc. Try to share your discipline and any ideas that you can find, such that this document, you can make a copy for it, bring it into your institution. So this is the beautiful part, that if you work in a Cal State San Marcos or at Miracosta or at Palomar, we're trying to expand what can decolonize teaching look at different aspects or different departments, such that we don't see ourselves kind of like silo, that only the multicultural department is in charge of this, or ethnic studies. It should not be the case. Every department and every institution should be responsible for decolonizing and making it more student-centered and equity-minded. Anti-racist. So I'll share one. People, again, there's plenty of rows. Don't be shy and jump in. And again, remember that one of the things that this Tri-Equity Conference is trying to kind of like make people aware is be comfortable with your uncomfortableness. If you just share, I don't know yet, that's perfect, because that's what we expect of our students. They didn't know certain content subject a week ago, but now they do, and now they're using it in a new presentation. So likewise, you can say, right now, I don't know, but I'm willing to take the resources that we have. So I'm going to read one. Health is promoting that I've done a lot of work on my syllabus and Canvas course. My next practice will be a thoughtful redesign of my lecture presentation information to ensure that I'm including images that are inclusive and incorporating more BIPOC readings and videos. I will also do this in the next version of the OER health textbooks that I've developed for my course. So that's a great implementation into health.
And I'll go over languages in Spanish. I did not create this, but I would like to share Dr. Randolph's statement included in his Spanish syllabus.
Art history is bringing the idea of to restructure the syllabus to have student-focused, supportive language rather than punitive language that has been handed down in several apologies. IRB, that's anything that kind of like has been handed down. That's very colonial kind of thinking. I do share a lot. So one of the things that we want to promote is that these ideas are not entirely our own. So we have been influenced by Dr. Bettina Love, Ibram X. Kendi, and many other authors that are even local. Dr. Help me, Hossna.
Estela
Black
Ben
Lives
Simon.
Matter.
Dr. Estela Ben Simon was another one. She wrote a great book with two other authors, McNear, about equity, more than equity talk, based on equity walk, I believe it. That was
and Black Minds Matter.
Dr. Luke Wood,
Luke
and
Wood, yes.
his book Black Minds Matter is a great book. Layla Saad wrote Me and White Supremacy. That was a great book as well. There's so many books out there. I feel like every day I'm going to Amazon and I'm buying a new book. But just know that it's more than just reading a book. It's actually putting it into practice. And so that's one thing that I really, really focus on at my institution. I do professional development workshops for book clubs. And then afterwards, I have institutional outcomes developed by those book clubs. So I actually make my institution a little bit more accountable than just reading a book. I say, what are we going to do as an institution? And then what are we going to do at the 500 feet level within the classroom? And student services, what are we going to do? So this is great practice to start looking at all these scholarly works and, what is everybody doing? And this is why NCHEA is so crucial, because rather than reinventing the wheel or feeling that you're 2 years late from decolonizing your syllabus, this is so important to have that partnership and to be able to share good practice. Because something that we don't know at Palomar, maybe our cousins at Maricosa can help us, or our other cousins at Cal State San Marcos. And in some cases, it might be our extended relatives in Sacramento. But this is why we all need to really work collaboratively.
So I'm going to leave this document, and make sure that you feel free to add more things or just make a copy into your Google Drive. But I think that we are on time, so I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Falcone or Rachel.
Should we do our closing remarks, Luis?
Yes.
Okay. We wanted to thank you all for attending this workshop, and we hope that you're able to now reconstruct your core syllabus to being equity and anti-racist focused. In an ideal world, every syllabus and course would be decolonized. One of my favorite quotes is by Dr. Bettina Love. Education can't save us. We have to save education.
And I have included the last link in the chat boxes, the PDF resource that you can download that has videos, articles, and books that take the decolonization deeper, and you can implement our institution. And the quote that I want to end it up today with is from Dr. Ibrahim Kendi. Like fighting an addiction, being an anti-racist requires persistent self-awareness, constant self-criticism, and regular self-examination. So hopefully you take those to implement into your teaching. We thank all of you for being part of this session, and hope that we were able to share things that you can put into practice in your classes and help our students.
And if you have any questions, now is the time to ask.
Thank you so much, Hossna and Luis. This was a wonderful presentation. I know that our attendees here walked away with just so much knowledge, and so I appreciate your expertise and sharing with us today. Friends at NCHEA, we will be back at 3:30 with our next main stage show. And so now's a great time. Take a bathroom break, stretch those legs, get a cup of coffee or whatever you're drinking on in this afternoon, or click on the networking button, because this morning I had the chance to meet a few individuals, and you would be surprised how awesome that experience is. Anyways, I'll see you back at 3:30, my friends.